with this first problem, we've got two triangles. So we've got triangle ABC and DEF. So if we're going to start with A and then B and then C, and then over here we're going to start with D and E and F. So if angle A is 70 and the measure of angle D, those should be equal because we said that the triangles were congruent. So 70 is going to equal 4x. So we'll divide by 4, and x will equal 17.5 as the value of x. So C. Number 2 is going to involve the counting principle, where you've got 5 choices of sandwiches, 4 desserts, 3 drinks, and you can have one of each. So you're going to multiply those to get 60. So how can you choose from different meals? So it's the counting principle. 5 times 4 times 3 gives you 60. Number 3, it asks for what is the value of x minus y if you know that x equals y plus b. So if we have x minus y, and we know that x equals y plus b, then this would be a substitution. We're going to substitute y plus b for x. So instead of x, we'll have y plus b minus y. And notice that the y's do eliminate themselves, and you're left with b. So your answer choice is A. Number 4, the study of, well, you got this correlation, and you got this dot plot, and it asks for what is the mode. And so when you're looking at the dots, you see, well, where, with the range of 50 to 59, which range do you see the most dots? And it would be here. So it's going to be in the range of 70 to 79. So 5 says if the area of the square is P, then what's the diagonal in terms of P? Well, if we have a square and the area is P, then that means that the side length had to be the square root of P times the square root of P. So the square root of P and the square root of P, if you multiply these together, you're going to get P. So that would be the area. So what's the diagonal in terms of P? So we're looking for this here. So we would take side length, square it, and the other side length, and square it, and we're looking for the diagonal. So when you square the square root of P, you're going to get P and P, and equals C squared. So you get 2P is equal to C squared, so you've got to take the square root, and so you'll get C is equal to square root of 2P, answer choice of C. Number 6 says there's a litter of 8 lab puppies. 3 are black, 1 is yellow, 4 are chocolate. What's the fraction of the puppies that are yellow? Well, you know that there's going to be 8 total, and 1 is yellow, so the fraction would be 1/8. Number 9, you got a 60-foot ribbon, and if you cut it into 6-foot pieces, you're going to have 10. You'll have 10 pieces. And so if you think about every time you cut, if you had one cut, you're going to end up with 2 pieces. And if you end up with 10 pieces, then that means you had to have 9 cuts. So on number 10, you've got the square root of 52, and you want to know it lies between which two integers. Well, the square root of 52 is not a perfect square, but we think about our perfect squares, and we've got the square root of 49, which is 7, and we've got the square root of 64, which is 8. So 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64. We know the square root of 52 falls in between 7 and 8. So that's looking and thinking about your perfect squares. Number 11, which of the following graphs we're looking at a distance versus time, that any of these graphs that's going to reflect this scenario. So at 8 o'clock a.m. is when everything begins. So you think everything begins at 0. So you're just checking all of your graphs. Mike drove his car to the mechanic. Well, this is the distance from home. And if you look at D, this line, this vertical line, means that he was staying at home for 15 minutes. Well, it says he drove his car, so D is out. So let's look at the rest of these. You've got time frames. And he drove his car to a mechanic, and it was a half a mile from home. So if you see your distance from home is in miles, this is 1 mile, so you're looking at the halfway mark. So each of these would still represent part of this, but he drove half a mile from home, and he waited next door at the coffee shop for an hour. So you're looking for this time where he drives and he waits for an hour. Well, this line doesn't quite show, and this line shows that there was never a wait at all, and it's not even quite an hour. So C is out. This one shows a drive and a wait for an hour. So A and E are very similar. This one shows a drive, but not quite the wait for an hour. So B is out. So we're looking between A and E. And then he got back into the car. So after this wait, he got back into the car and drove 2 miles to the library to drop off his books. So this one is showing a rate of driving. This one shows a vertical line. That's not going to work. A is your answer. Because then you see he drops off his books, shows this short pause. He returns his car. He goes back to the mechanic, which you see was the same distance from the library. He was able to fix the problem in 10 minutes. You see this short wait, and then he drove back home. So A models the scenario. Number 12, when you read through everything, you see you've got 700 voters, and you've got the percentages of voters, okay? So you've got 26% here. And you got 13% here. These are hard to read. They didn't copy as well. This one's going to be 18% and 20%. And this one is 17%. So if you change all of these to decimals, and you multiply each of them by 700, what you're looking for is the first number that when you multiply by 700, you get 126. So you do the multiplication, and you'll see that Marquez, this one right here, when you multiply, you'll get the 126 votes. Number 13, we see Pythagorean theorem involved in this. What's the appropriate length of the diagonal? So notice that we have, if we look at it this way, okay, we know that this is 8 and this is 4, so we're looking for the diagonal. So this is going to be Pythagorean theorem, so 4 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. So this is 16 plus 64 equals c squared. And so this is 60, 70, this is 80 is equal to c squared. And we know that the appropriate length of the diagonal would have to be, well, 81. If this was 81, then c would be 9. So we're right there at 9, which we know is greater than 85. So we would say appropriate would be 9 feet. 14, the postage stamp in country X is 50 cents for the first ounce. So for the first ounce, we've got 50 cents and 22 cents for each additional ounce. And postage for a half a pound cost how many cents? So what we know is that 1 pound is equal to 16 ounces. And so half a pound is going to equal 8 ounces. So it wants to know how much for half a pound. So we're only dealing with 8 ounces here. So for the first ounce, we're going to multiply by 50 cents. And then for the other 7 ounces would be 22 cents. So notice this is all in cents. So I'm just going to write that as a whole number of 50. So I'm going to have 50 and then 22 times 7. So that's 140. It's 154. So there's going to be 204 cents. So it would be A. $16. You've got this expression that needs to be simplified. And if you think about factoring, you see a bunch of 41s. So this is 41 squared, which is 41 times 41. And then you've got plus 41, all divided by 41. So you could look at factoring out a 41 in common. Well, that's going to be factored out in common. You're going to be left with a 41 here plus 1, all divided by 41. Well, now the 41s will divide out, and you're left with 41 plus 1, or 42. So B is your answer. 17, you're evaluating, which means they give you values for A, B, and C. So A is 4, B is 6, you're dividing by 2, and you're adding 1. So this is an evaluate and an order of operations. So you'll conduct 4 plus 6, that's 10. And then 10 divided by 2 plus 1, so that's 5 plus 1, so that'll give you 6. So B is your answer choice. 18, first 6 basketball games of the season, Jamal scores these 6. What is the difference between the mean and the median? So if you want to find the median, you would need to list your point totals in numerical order from least to greatest. So you've got 12 and 14 and 15, 16, 20, and 22. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got an even amount. So the median is going to be right here in the middle. So the median would be 15.5. And then the mean is your average. So you need to find the sum of these 6 numbers. So add 12, 14, 15, 16, 20, and 22, and you're going to get 99. You're going to divide that by 6, and you're going to find that to be 16.5 as the average. What was the question? What is the difference between the mean and the median? So 16.5 minus 15.5 gives you 1. 19, we've got the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. That is a rate. The distance from Earth to the moon is this. That is a distance. How long? We're looking for time. So we have a distance equals rate times time formula. And I want to solve for time, so I'm going to divide both by r. So I need to take the distance, which is 239,000, and divide it by the rate, which is 186,000. That should give us the time in seconds. So once you do the division, you'll get 1 and 2800 seconds. Your answer is A. 20. If the brakes are applied to a car traveling 60 miles an hour, there is a formula for braking distance, and S is your braking distance, and V is the velocity, and that's going to be 88 feet per second. So V is going to be 88, and we're going to square it. And it is going to be negative, so we'll take 2, and then mu is the coefficient, so that would be 75 hundredths times acceleration, which is negative 15. So it's already negative, and acceleration's negative. So I'm just going to put the negative up here, and that's going to still mean that the answer is going to be positive because our distance would be positive. So when you square 88, you're going to get a negative 7,744. And then in the denominator, you're going to get negative 22.5. And so when you divide that, you're going to get 344 feet. So A is your answer. 21, a box contains 2 types of cookies, chocolate chip and macadamian. There are 5 times as many chocolate chips. So I've got chocolate chip, I've got macadamia nut, and I know I have a total of 24. Well, there's 5 times as many of these chocolate chips as there are macadamia nuts. So I'm going to let X represent the type of cookie. And if the box contains 2 dozen cookies, well, 2 dozen is 24. How many are macadamia nut cookies? So if X is macadamia nut, then the chocolate chip would be 5 times that. So these are like terms. You can combine that. You get 6X equals 24. So X is 4. This one, you've got a list of fractions, and it says choose the fraction below to complete the list, and the fraction should decrease from left to right. So we're getting larger to smaller, and we need to know what fraction will go in between. Well, since this is negative and this is 0, this is negative 6/7, that one's out. And we already have 0, so that one's out. And this one would be 3 halves, which would be 1 1/2, which would put you over here to the left. So D is out, and then we have another negative, so that one would be out. So 2/3 is the only choice that would go in the middle. 23. In the following figure, lines G and H are parallel. If Y is equal to angle X plus 80 degrees, what's the value of X in degrees? Well, if this one is X, then we know this one is X. So angle Y is X plus 80. Well, that plus X should give you 180 degrees. A straight angle is going to be 180. How do I know I can put X here? Because these are corresponding angles. So this would give you 2X plus 80 is equal to 180. If I subtract 80, I have 2X is equal to 100. So X is equal to 50. And it says, what is the value of X in degrees? And it would be 50 degrees. So Wilma has 3 pairs of red socks, 6 pairs of white socks, 5 pairs of blue socks in her dresser. So total, you've got 14 pairs of socks. If she randomly selects one pair, what's the probability she'll select white? So we needed to know what the total would be. And basically we're looking for what's the probability that we're going to get a white pair on the first try. And so that's going to be 6/14, which we see 6/14 is not on here, but we can divide both by 2 to find an equivalent fraction of 3/7. So 24 is C. 25 for the right triangle ABC. It says that AB is the hypotenuse and angle A is 30. Well, it said it was a right triangle, so we know we've got 90. It says it's a right triangle here, so we know we got 90 and 30, plus this other value should give us 180. So that's 120 plus X. So X should be 60. What's the measure of angle B? Well, angle B would have to be 60 degrees. Number 26 says, what is this exactly? So we're basically looking for something times something to equal 6,561. So you could just square each of these and see which one equals 6,561. You could use the calculator to compute the square root of 6,561, and you would find that that's 81, so that would be A. 27, if Y is 4 less than the square root of X, then which of the following is the expression for X? So we've got the equation, but I want to solve it for X. And then whatever X equals, I'm looking for this equation. So I want to solve for the square root of X, so I'm going to add 4. So I'm going to get 4 plus Y, or Y plus 4, either way, is equal to the square root of X. Well, I need to do the inverse of the radical, which is the square root, so I want to square both sides. That is the inverse. Squaring would be the inverse of the square root. So X is equal to Y plus 4 quantity square, or if you had written Y plus 4 quantity square equal X, these are the same, and E is your answer. 28 is an exponent rule. Then we're looking at the product rule. So when the bases are the same and you're multiplying, you're allowed to add the exponents, but only if the exponents are the same. So you get 2 to the 2 plus 3, or 2 to the 5th. Notice there's not a value here with base of 2 to the 5th, so you would need to compute that, and that would be 32. '29, we said a line with the same slope and y-intercept as this. So notice all of the answers are in standard form. This is in slope-intercept form. So what I'm going to do is, since everything is an integer, I'm going to multiply the entire equation by 3. So 3y is equal to 6/3, which is 2x, and 3 times a negative 2 would be negative 6. So I'm going to write it in the standard form of ax plus by equals c. And a couple of ways I could do this. I could subtract the 2x to both sides, and so that would give me negative 2x plus 3y is equal to negative 6. And I don't see that, so if I change and multiply everything by a negative 1, then that would change the sign of everything. So I get 2x minus 3y is equal to 6, and 2x minus 3y is equal to 6. C is the result. 30 says, what's the length of the missing side in a right triangle? So many times with our right triangle, we're using the Pythagorean theorem. And these are your legs, remember? And then this is your hypotenuse. So find the missing side if the two legs are 8 and 15. So we're looking for the hypotenuse. So 8 squared plus 15 squared equals c squared. So that's 64 plus 225. And that's going to be 289 equals c squared. And if you take the square root, you're going to get 17 as your answer. So which number is in the hundredths place when you take this number and divide it by 100? So remember, when you take these, when you take a decimal or any number and you divide it by 100, you're actually making it smaller by 2 decimal places. So this number is 100 times smaller than this number. But it says which number is in the hundredths place when you do the division. Well, here's the tenths, here's the hundredths. Your answer is 4, so it's C. 32, you have a fraction and you know it equals 0. So I'm going to make the comparison 0 to 1. And I'm going to do just make this a proportion and do cross products. So 1 times x minus 8 is x minus 8, and y plus 3 times 0 is 0. When I solve for x, I get 8. Now, I want an answer of 8, which means B and C are my choices. And what is this y business? Well, that just means that you can't have 0 in the denominator. So that means y cannot be negative 3. So C is your answer. What is the mean and the median of the first 9 natural numbers? 0 is not a natural number. It's when we're talking about natural numbers, we're talking about counting numbers, and 0 is not a counting number. So if we find the median, see we have 9 numbers, so right in the middle would be 5. So that would be our median. But when we add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way to 9 and we add those up, we're going to get 45. And when we divide it by how many numbers we have, which is 9, we're going to get 5. So the mean and the median are equivalent. With this one, it's asking for the area of this figure. So we're looking for the area of this triangle as well as the semicircle. So I'm going to put a triangle here and semicircle here because we want to find the area of both and then we want to add them together. So since it's a triangle, it's going to be 8 times 6, or length times width, and then we're going to take half of it. So the area of the triangle would be 24 units. Now the semicircle, we need to know the area of a circle, which is pi times the radius squared. Well, I need to know what this length is. The 24 only helps me with area. So to do the square root, to find the length here, I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So 6 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. So that's 36 plus 64 equals c squared. 36 and 64 is 100. If 100 equals c squared, then that means c is 10. So this distance, entire distance, is 10. Well, that means the diameter is 10. So what's the radius? Radius is half of that, so it's 5. So with the semicircle, we know that it's going to be 5 squared times pi, but I want the semicircle, which means I'm going to have to cut it in half. So 5 squared is 25, and I'm going to leave it in terms of pi. So 24 plus 25 pi divided by 2 square units would be the area. (35), we have this proportion, m divided by n is 2/3, which means we could also say that m is 2 and n is 3. So it's asking which of the following statements cannot be true. So where would it be false? So you could kind of go through each of these. If 2 is m, so that's 4, and 3 is 3, and n is 3, so that would give you 4/9. That one's true. M plus n, so 2 plus 3, that's 5, divided by 3, that's a true statement. N is 3, so 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 divided by n, or 1 divided by 3, that's a true statement. N squared, so that's going to be 9. M squared is going to be 2. When you square 2, you get 4. That's a true statement. So this must be our only answer here. So m minus n would be 2 minus 3 divided by 3. This would be negative 1/3, and it does not equal 1/3. The expression 18 minus 6x is equivalent to one of these. So this is another one where you could kind of check line by line. 6 plus 9 is going to be 15. And then if I distribute the negative 3 to both, I'm going to get negative 6x plus 3. And 15 and 3, that's going to give me 18 minus 6x. And that actually is the answer. So we could continue to work through all these. You're looking for which one would be 18 minus 6x, and it would be A. (37), which chart best describes the information given in the table? So you're looking at these bar graphs, and along the bottom is your units sold, and along the top on the Y are your different locations. So you're noticing that if you take the strip mall, there's 430,000 units sold. So if you find strip mall on each of these, Which one shows 430,000? So you're talking a little bit more than 400,000. That one looks good. Strip mall, it should be over here. So B is out. Strip mall should be, so that one's close. And then strip mall, that one's close. All right, so we've checked strip mall. What about Second Street? We're looking about 250,000. So just use a different color here. Second Street. And Second Street should be a little bit, here's 200. So halfway ought to be 300. And Second Street is more than 300. So A is out. And this is 300. C is out. Second Street's a little less. So Second Street would be, this would be correct to show about 250,000. River Mall would be, of this one, River Mall would be 350,000. That's almost 400,000. That looks good. And Center City is 450,000, which is a little bit more. So D would be correct. If the diagonal of a square is 10, then what is its area? So in this case, if you have the diagonal of a square and you know it's 10, then its area, if you know this is 10, then if you think about its area, which would be an area of a square coming off of that side, which is not drawn well at all. So what we have is a square, so that would be 10 squared would be the area, and we've got the side squared plus the side squared. I'm sorry, 10 squared would be the length of that diagonal. So 10 squared is 100. I'm just using the Pythagorean theorem because it's asking what would be the area of this. So this would be 2s squared. So if I divide by 2, I'm going to get 50 is equal to s squared. So really, I'm just worried about what the s squared would be, and it would be 50. 39, which of the following are irrational numbers? So if you look here, you see a decimal with repeating. Well, that's a repeating decimal, which can still be written as a ratio. That one's out. Here's another decimal. Here's a fraction. This is pi, and this is the square root of 19, and 19 is not a perfect square. So A and E are both irrational numbers. If M books cost $4, so we're going to say 4M, and N books cost $6, and it says the mean is, well, you would add those up and divide by M plus N, because that's how many books you would have. So wherever we see 4M plus 6N divided by, so this one's 4M plus 6N, 4M, that's a subtraction. That's not going to work. That one's not. So it's between C and D, and it would be C. 41, if 0 is less than x is less than 5, then which of the following statements must be true? Well, if you, it's talking about x squared, so if you square each of the terms, you're going to get to 25, and you're going to get to x squared, and you're going to get to 0. And so squaring it doesn't change any of the inequality symbols. So B would match that. Number 42, if 1/3 of A is equal to B, Well, so what is the value of 1/6 of A? Well, if 1/3 is times A is equal to B, I could multiply both sides by 3, and all that would give me is A is equal to 3B. So if I wanted to take 1/6 of A, or multiply the entire piece by 1/6, so I'm going to get 1/6 of A is equal to 3B times 6, and 3/6 is equal to 1/2. So you get 1/6 A is equal to 1/2 B. So what is it in terms of B? So since you've taken 1/6 of A, you're looking at what it is in terms of B. It would be 1/2 B. 43, you're looking at a partial graph, and he just wants to know what's the cost of a ticket to a movie. Well, this is 0, 0, and we can see approximately that at 5, we're at approximately right at 100. So 100 divided by 5 should be 20. So that would be $20 a ticket, and that would be D. Here we've got a fair coin, and if we flip it, it says, what's the probability that a heads will show up? Well, if we flip it one time, it's 1/2. And then what's the probability if we flip it a second time? Well, it's 1/2. A third time, it's 1/2. A fourth time, it's 1/2. So what's the probability that a head will appear on each of the 4 flips? Well, this is all dependent events. And what's the probability that we will get a head flipped 4 times? So you'd multiply these fractions and you would get 1/16, which is A. So it's saying, what's the probability that you would get a head on the first one, and then a head on the second one, and then a head on the third flip, and then a head on the fourth flip? So this is your compound probability, and you get to multiply those different probabilities. So it's a half every time. You're either getting head or a tail. So the probability of getting a head is going to be 1 out of 2, and you're looking at doing that 4 times. So that's why we multiplied 1/2 by itself 4 times. 45, the measure of the largest angle. So I want to know what the largest angle in this triangle would be. Well, I'm not given any angle measurements, but I do know that this angle plus this angle plus this angle is going to equal 180 degrees. So my like terms would be 2x, 3x, and 1x. So that's going to be 6x. And then -20 and -20 combined for a 0 pair. So I've got 6x is equal to 100. So if I divide by 6, I'm going to get x is 30. Well, notice 30 is an answer. But 30 is what x is. So 30 is this angle measure. Well, now I need to substitute 30 in for here. So 30 times 2 is 60. 60 plus 20, well, that's 80. And then here I'm going to have 3 times 30, which is 90. But when you take 90 minus 20, you're going to get 70. And notice that when you do that, 70 and 30, that's 180. So what's that measure of the largest angle? It would be 80. So if you've got a $60 radio and it's discounted 25%, that means you're only paying 75% of it. So but then you get another 10%, which means of all of that, you're paying 90%. So what's the final cost if the sales tax is 4%? Okay, well, sales tax is a little different because you're paying, with sales tax, you're paying 100% of the total and then the additional 4%. So you're actually paying 104%, which is a decimal, is 1 400. So we're going to multiply all of that by 1 400. So it's asking for what's the final cost, and that's with discounts as well as tax. So you're going to multiply 60 times 75 hundredths times 90 hundredths times 1 400. And you're going to get $42.12 as your answer. 47, if the square root of x minus 3 is equal to 5, then what is x equal? All right, so we've worked another one like this before in this practice test, and when you want to get rid of the radical, you're going to square both sides of the equation. So that's going to give you just the radicand, x minus 3, and 5 squared will be 25. You would add 3, and x would equal 28. So if you want to remove the radical symbol here, you've got to square both sides to do that. Notice that just lifts the radical here, x minus 3. And another reason that that radical is really x minus 3 to the 1/2 power. So if you want to get the 1/2 power to a power of 1, you're going to raise it all to the second power. So 1/2 times 2, this is using your power rule with exponents. When you take half of 2, you get x minus 3 to the first equals 25, and I don't have to write the parentheses to the first. It's just considered x minus 3, and that's what we found here. There's just a couple of different ways to look at it. One's with the radical and one's with rational exponents. Number 48, you've got a total of 35 students that take at least French or Russian. So I'm going to have a number that take French or Russian, and that's a total. And then I know that if 25 take Russian, so I do have a number that's taking Russian, and then a number that's taking both. I want to know how many students are only taking French. So my number taking French, I don't know. My number taking Russian is 25. The number taking both is 10, and all of that equals 35. So 25 minus 10, that's going to give me 15. Number taking French only, so I'm going to subtract 15, and that's going to give me the number taking French would be 20, but I have to remember that there's 10 taking both languages. So I'm going to do 20 take away 10, and that's going to give me only 10 students taking French. And the last two, which of the following lengths is sufficient information to find the area of a circle? Well, remember, the area of a circle is area equals pi r squared. If you know the radius, you're going to be good to be able to find that. Well, what if you were only given the diameter? Well, you could cut the diameter in half or divide it by 2, and that would give you the radius. If you had the circumference, if you only knew the circumference, then you could, let's say the circumference was 10, you would be able to find the radius. which means any of the above, D, would be correct. And last, how many non-negative integers are there such that when you take the integer, raise it to the fourth power, you're less than 1,000? So it says non-negative integers. So you think about all your integers: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and just keep going. So if you raise all these numbers to the fourth power, what you're wanting to do is figure out, well, how many answers stay less than 1,000? And what we would find is about right here. And all of these would be sufficient, because if you take 6 to the fourth, you're going to get 1,296. But if you take 25 or 5 to the fourth, you're going to get 625. So these numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so those 6 would all have, if you take the number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and you take it to the fourth power, you're still going to be less than 1,000. So it's more than 5 numbers.